Welcome to the Resistance.
And welcome back to Gen X Resistance. I'm your host, Paul Stevens, and this is where I break down the news, the trends, and some of the cultural shifts that actually matter to Gen X. Now, today I'm going to talk about something that has been brewing for decades, and that is the collapse of the trust in the mainstream media, and why Gen X might be the ones best positioned to take over independent media. Now, picture this. November 1988. A cult classic hits the theaters. The name of that classic? They Live. I was 14 years old at the time, and I was right in the middle of my early teenage years, and this movie left a very lasting impression. Look, if you haven't seen They Live, then do yourself a favor and go watch it. You will not be disappointed. Or you might be, I don't know. Now, the film stars one of my all-time favorite wrestlers, Rowdy Roddy Piper. And to set the stage, Piper was a drifter just kind of trying to get by. And what starts off as a simple story of this working class guy, this average Joe just looking for work, quickly turns into something much bigger. And Piper's character stumbles upon a mysterious pair of sunglasses that once he puts those on, reveals a very different reality. And this reality is ruled by alien overlords who control humanity through subliminal messages. Billboards, TV broadcasts, and magazines, they all contain hidden commands like obey, consume, stay asleep. Now, beyond its sci-fi action elements, They Live is a sharp critique of consumerism, media control, and unchecked capitalism. The irony, of course, is that They Live is a Hollywood production critiquing greed and capitalism, made by an industry that thrives on ticket sales, streaming revenue, and billion-dollar franchises. And John Carpenter, even though he produced this movie or wrote this movie as a critique to the Reagan years, a rebuke against yuppies, he's not exactly live in a van down by the river. No, he's living in a 13,000 square foot mansion in Hollywood, just like the rest of us. But I digress. Here's what this movie did bring us. It features one of the greatest and longest fight scenes in cinematic history. It's right up there with The Quiet Man starring John Wayne. Piper and Keith David go at it in an alleyway for over 5 minutes, and it is brutal, drawn out. It feels real. It's very unpolished. It almost hurts to watch it. Now, we as Gen X, we have had those metaphorical sunglasses on for years. We grew up questioning authority, distrusting the mainstream narrative, and really finding our own way to get information. So today, I'm breaking down how the media has changed, why Gen X never fully bought into the mainstream to begin with, and why now is the perfect time for us to take the lead in independent media. All right, so let's talk about the obvious, and that is no one trusts the media anymore. And I mean no one. According to the Edelman Trust Barometer, trust in traditional news outlets is at an all-time low. Gallup backs up these numbers, showing that nearly 70% of Americans have little to no confidence in major news networks. And honestly, who can blame them? Think about how media has evolved since we were kids. The big networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, they controlled everything. And then the 24-hour news cycle happened in the 90s, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and they were all competing for the same ratings. Now, by the 2000s, corporate mergers meant just a handful of companies controlled nearly all of the mainstream media. And today, only 6 corporations own 90% of everything we read, watch, or listen to in the mainstream. That's Comcast, Disney, AT&T, Sony, Fox, and Paramount Global, which you may have known it as Viacom CBS. Now, that means whether you're tuning into CNN or Fox or scrolling through Facebook or reading the news article on Yahoo, it's all coming from the same corporate machine. Gen X, though, well, we've always been skeptical. We grew up during the aftermath of Watergate. We saw the rise of corporate-controlled news, and we never really trusted talking heads anyway. That's why we started looking elsewhere. Now, unlike millennials and Gen Z who grew up on social media, Gen X grew up in the wild, wild west of the internet. We were the ones building forums, joining early chat rooms, and creating blogs way before the term content creation was even a thing. Remember BBS, the bulletin board system? Usenet groups? Early days of blogging? Even MySpace was more customizable and decentralized than today's internet. We always found ways to communicate outside of the mainstream. And when traditional media didn't exactly give us what we wanted, well, we built our own. Take Matt Drudge. Born in '66, that makes him a Gen Xer. Agree with his viewpoints or not, the Drudge Report changed online news forever. Or remember the explosions of the independent blogs of the early 2000s. That was all us. That was all Gen X. So it's no surprise that we're now seeing Gen X take over the podcasting, Substack, and independent media world. We never relied on centralized news source, and we sure as hell don't need one now. And one of the best modern examples of using non-traditional media to reach people, Donald Trump. Now, some of you may not like this, but you can't ignore the fact that he rewrote the playbook for political communication. And this last election, he took it much, much further. Think about it. Traditional political campaigns used to rely on network news, newspaper, endorsements, and mainstream coverage to get their message out. Trump bypassed all of that. And how did he do that? He dominated alternative platforms. He made Truth Social a direct supporter newsfeed, cutting out the media middleman. He leveraged viral clips on X to reach audiences who don't even watch cable news. He used podcast, independent influencers, used the meme culture. They became tools for mobilizing younger voters and non-traditional conservatives. He focused on Rumble and Telegram, where mainstream censorship doesn't control the narrative. And here's where it gets interesting. Gen Z and the younger millennials, who supposedly lean left, were consuming this content at record levels. There was a major shift among young voters, especially among non-white, working-class men who felt disconnected from traditional Democrat messaging. This is the power of independent media. It's no longer about who controls the TV networks. It's about who controls the narrative. If a political candidate can leverage non-traditional media to reshape an election, imagine what Gen X can do by owning the independent media. All right, X, so where do we go from here? We are in the middle of a major shift. Mainstream media is losing its grip while independent voices are rising. And Gen X is perfectly positioned to lead this revolution. Look at the platforms available today. Substack. More and more journalists are ditching corporate media to write independently. Patreon. Independent creators are getting direct support from their audience instead of having to rely on ad revenue. Podcasting and YouTube, from Joe Rogan to Barry Weiss to countless smaller creators. Independent voices are thriving. Let's not forget probably one of our biggest advantages. As Gen X, we don't need permission to create. Unlike millennials, who were conditioned to chase likes and play nice with algorithms, and Gen Z, who relies on TikTok's algorithmic dopamine rush, Gen X grew up figuring things out on our own. We weren't waiting for mainstream approval in the 90s, and we don't need it now. If you have something to say, start a podcast, write a blog, make a YouTube channel. The tools are there. All right, so let's sum this up. Trust in the mainstream media is at a rock bottom low, and for good reason. Gen X has always been skeptical and always will, and they will always find a way to communicate outside of the system. Trump's use of non-traditional media shows how powerful independent media platforms have become. And right now is the perfect time for us to take over independent media, and the tools are all there. So here's my challenge to you. If you've ever thought about starting a podcast, a blog, or YouTube channel, man, just go do it. We need more independent Gen X voices out there. And I want to hear from you. Where do you currently get your news? Do you still trust mainstream media? You can hit me up on my email at genxresistant@gmail.com or my Buzzsprout fan mail. The link will be in the show notes. both links. And let's keep this conversation going. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share, leave a review. It helps independent voices like mine get heard. Because let's be real, the algorithms aren't always doing us any favors. So until next time, keep thinking for yourself and stay rad, my friends.